You don't belong here. This is first class. Where are your parents? Flight attendant Kelly Morrison's voice pierced through the cabin as she towered over 8-year-old Marcus, sitting quietly in seat 2A. Her face was flushed with anger, and every passenger in first class turned to watch. Marcus didn't flinch. He looked up at her with calm eyes and held out his boarding pass. "This is my seat, ma'am." Kelly snatched the boarding pass from his small hand, crumpling it as she examined it like it was fake. "I'm calling security. Children don't fly first class alone." Marcus sat perfectly still, his hands gripping the armrests. He was wearing a pressed shirt and slacks. His tablet showed a presentation about solar energy. But Kelly didn't care about any of that. She saw what she wanted to see, a black child who didn't belong. She grabbed the plane's phone. "This is Flight Attendant Morrison. We have a situation in first class, an unaccompanied minor. His ticket doesn't seem legitimate. I need security immediately." The other passengers whispered and pulled out phones. Some shook their heads, but no one spoke up, not yet. Marcus's heart pounded, but he stayed calm just like his mother taught him. Kelly hung up and smirked down at him. "Security will be here in 2 minutes to escort you off this plane. Next time, fly where you actually belong." If you want to see the justice that rained down on this flight attendant, hit that subscribe button right now, because what happened next blew everyone's mind. Marcus looked Kelly straight in the eye. "My mother is going to be very upset when she hears about this." Kelly actually laughed. "Oh, I'm sure Mommy will be very disappointed in you for trying to sneak into first class." That's when the sound cut through everything else. Sharp, powerful, unmistakable. The sound of expensive heels on the jetway floor. Getting closer, getting louder. Gate agent scrambled. A supervisor froze. Because walking toward the aircraft was a tall, powerful black woman in an executive suit that radiated authority. Behind her, 3 lawyers in sharp suits, the airport director, 2 airline executives looking terrified. Her expression was ice cold. Her eyes were fire. Kelly was still facing Marcus, completely oblivious to what was coming down that jetway. The heels got louder. 10 steps away. 5 steps away. Marcus sat up straighter, his face shifted from fear to hope. Because he knew those footsteps. The jetway door opened, and the woman who just heard everything stepped onto the plane. Kelly had no idea that the storm that just walked through that door was about to destroy her entire world. Because that woman wasn't just Marcus's mother. She was the biggest woman there, and Kelly Morrison just made the biggest mistake of her life. If you believe no child should be discriminated, hit the subscribe button and type yes in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. Living Stories will definitely reply you. But let me take you back to where this nightmare really started. Because what happened on that plane was just the explosion. The fuse was lit 30 minutes earlier at the gate. Marcus Jennings stood in the boarding line at Chicago O'Hare International Airport, clutching his boarding pass like it was made of gold. He was 8 years old, barely tall enough to see over the check-in counter, wearing his best outfit that his grandmother had pressed before she passed. His backpack was almost as big as he was, stuffed with his presentation materials, his research notes, and his prized possession, a prototype of his solar-powered water purification system. Marcus wasn't just any 8-year-old. He was a certified genius. A child prodigy who made scientists twice his age look like amateurs. In 3rd grade, while his classmates were learning multiplication tables, Marcus was designing technology that could provide clean drinking water to communities that had none. His invention used solar panels to power a filtration system that could purify contaminated water in minutes. Environmental engineers at Northwestern University reviewed his work and called it groundbreaking. This wasn't a kid playing with a science kit. This was a legitimate inventor who happened to be 8 years old. The National Youth Science Competition in Seattle had invited him as their youngest competitor ever. Marcus was representing his school, his city, and the memory of everyone he'd lost. His mother, who died of cancer 2 years ago. His grandmother, who raised him until she passed 3 months back. He was flying alone because he had no one left. But he wasn't scared. He was determined. Marcus stepped up to the gate counter and handed his boarding pass to Linda Cooper, a 45-year-old white woman who'd worked for Continental Wing Airlines for 12 years. Linda took one look at Marcus, then at his boarding pass, and her face twisted with confusion and suspicion. "Sweetie, this says first class. That can't be right." Marcus stood on his tiptoes to see over the counter. "Yes, ma'am, that's my seat. My mommy bought it for me." Linda stared at him like he'd just spoken another language. "Honey, children don't fly first class, especially not alone. Where are your parents?" Marcus's voice was clear and confident, the way his mother taught him to speak. "My mother purchased this ticket for me. I'm flying to Seattle for a science competition. I have all my documents right here." He pulled out a folder with his competition invitation, his school permission forms, his unaccompanied minor paperwork, and his mother's authorization letter. Linda barely glanced at the documents. Instead, she picked up her phone. "James, I need you at gate 27. We have a situation." She looked down at Marcus with something between pity and suspicion. "Sweetie, just wait right here, okay? We need to figure out what's going on with your ticket." Supervisor James Patterson arrived within 2 minutes. He was a stocky white man in his 50s, with a permanent scowl and 23 years of airline experience that had made him cynical about everything. He took Marcus's boarding pass, examined it like he was inspecting a counterfeit bill, then looked down at Marcus. "Son, where did you really get this ticket? Did you find it somewhere?" Marcus looked him straight in the eye. "No, sir. My mother purchased it. I'm going to Seattle to compete in the National Youth Science Competition. I'm presenting my solar-powered water purification system." Patterson exchanged a look with Linda that said everything. They didn't believe him. Not for a second. Patterson leaned down, getting uncomfortably close to Marcus's face. "Listen, kid, first-class tickets cost a lot of money. You're 8 years old, flying alone. This doesn't add up. So I'm going to ask you one more time. Where did you get this ticket?" Marcus didn't back down. "My mother bought it." Patterson stood up and turned to Linda. "Call security. This ticket might be stolen. We need to verify this before we let him anywhere near that plane." That's when the other passengers started noticing. The boarding line had grown behind Marcus, and people were getting impatient. A white woman in her 30s leaned to her husband. "Is that child alone? Where are his parents? Why is he holding up the line?" An elderly white man, loud enough for everyone to hear, muttered, "Probably using someone else's miles. They do that, you know. Fraud is everywhere these days." A young white couple in their 20s started whispering and giggling. The woman pulled out her phone and took a picture of Marcus standing at the counter. They were treating him like he was a spectacle, like he was entertainment. Marcus heard every word, saw every stare. But he stood firm. He didn't cry. He didn't yell. He looked each person in the eye with a dignity that shamed every single one of them, even if they were too ignorant to realize it. Airport security arrived. A guard named Derek Mitchell, a bulky white man with a shaved head, walked up and immediately grabbed Marcus's backpack off his shoulder. "We need to search this." Marcus's voice rang out, clear and strong. "You can't take my things without permission. I know my rights. You need probable cause to search my belongings, and sitting in a boarding line isn't probable cause." Derek's eyebrows shot up. Patterson laughed, but it wasn't a friendly laugh. "Listen, kid, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. Who really gave you this ticket? Because I'm not buying this story about your mother." Marcus took a deep breath. His grandmother's voice echoed in his mind. "Baby, when people don't believe you, you tell them the truth louder." So Marcus stood as tall as his 8-year-old frame would allow, and he spoke with perfect clarity. "My mother is Dr. Victoria Jennings Rothschild. She's the CEO of Skybridge Airlines. She purchased this ticket for me because I earned it. I'm going to Seattle to change the world, and you're trying to stop me because you don't think I belong here." For a moment, everyone went silent. Then Patterson and Linda burst out laughing, actually laughing. Linda wiped tears from her eyes. "Oh, sweetie, Sure, honey. And I'm the president. Patterson shook his head, still chuckling. Kid, you're a creative little liar, I'll give you that. CEO of Skybridge, that's a good one. They didn't believe him. They thought he was making it up. They thought an 8-year-old black boy couldn't possibly have a mother powerful enough to run an empire. So they dismissed him, mocked him, humiliated him in front of dozens of passengers. Patterson pointed to a corner near the gate. Sit over there while we verify your information, and don't even think about getting on that plane until we clear this up. Marcus walked to the corner with his head held high. He sat down, pulled out a book from his backpack, a college-level textbook on quantum physics, and started reading. He didn't cry. He didn't complain. He just read. Because his mother taught him that excellence speaks louder than ignorance ever could. Patterson got on the gate microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a brief delay in boarding due to a security concern. We appreciate your patience. The passengers groaned, and every single one of them looked at Marcus. Their eyes blamed him for the delay. Their expressions said what their mouths wouldn't. That little black boy is causing problems. One woman actually said it out loud. This is ridiculous. That child is the problem. Just remove him so the rest of us can board. Marcus kept reading his book, but his hands were shaking slightly. He was 8 years old, alone, being treated like a criminal, and no one was defending him. No one was standing up for him. He was surrounded by adults, and not a single one of them thought to question why 2 gate agents were humiliating a child. If you want to see what happened when Marcus's mother found out about this, you better subscribe right now, because the revenge that's coming is going to be absolutely epic. Patterson and Linda spent 15 minutes making phone calls, checking systems, looking at Marcus like he was a puzzle they couldn't solve. Meanwhile, Marcus sat in that corner reading about particle physics, unbothered on the outside, but terrified on the inside, because he'd done everything right. He had every document, every permission slip, every piece of paper that proved he belonged on that flight, and none of it mattered because they'd already decided he was lying. Here's my question for you. Marcus told them his mother was the CEO of the airline, and they laughed in his face. If you were Marcus, and adults were mocking you when you were telling the truth, what would you do? Would you keep fighting, or would you give up? Drop your answer in the comments because what Marcus did next defined his entire character. Finally, Patterson walked back over to Marcus. All right, kid, your ticket checks out. You can board. But we're going to be watching you. He said it like he was doing Marcus a favor. Like Marcus should be grateful they were letting him on a plane he had every legal right to board. Marcus closed his book, put it carefully in his backpack, and walked toward the gate. Every passenger stared at him. Some with curiosity, some with contempt, some with that casual racism that pretends to be concern. Marcus walked down that jetway alone, knowing that his mother had no idea what just happened. Knowing that the fight wasn't over. Knowing that when he got on that plane, it was probably going to get worse. But he walked anyway. Because Marcus Jennings didn't quit. And he was about to teach everyone on that flight a lesson they'd never forget. Marcus finally boarded that plane after 30 minutes of humiliation at the gate. He walked down the aisle with perfect posture, his head held high, his small hands gripping the straps of his backpack. He'd been accused of theft, mocked by adults, and treated like a criminal. But he didn't let it break him. He walked to seat 2A in first class like he owned the world. Flight attendant Kelly Morrison was restocking the overhead bins when she saw him. Her face twisted with disgust. Excuse me, what are you doing up here?" Her voice cut through the cabin like a siren. Every head in first class turned to look. Marcus stopped at his row and pointed to his seat. "Going to my seat, ma'am. 2A. Right here." Kelly stormed over and snatched the boarding pass from his hand before he could even sit down. "This can't be right. Coach is in the back." She examined the pass like it was written in invisible ink, shaking her head in disbelief. Marcus stayed calm. "I know where Coach is, ma'am. My seat is here in first class." That's when the passengers started chiming in. Richard Weber, a white businessman in seat 1A, wearing an expensive suit and a Rolex, looked up from his laptop. "Is this kid seriously in first class?" His tone dripped with contempt and disbelief. Patricia Donovan, a white woman in her 40s sitting in 3B, clutched her designer handbag like Marcus was going to steal it. "This is ridiculous. I paid $1,200 for peace and quiet, not to babysit someone's child." Kelly turned to the cabin with theatrical exasperation. "Everyone, I apologize for this disruption. We'll handle it." She grabbed the plane's phone and called Supervisor Tom Bradley over the intercom. "Tom, I need you in first class immediately. We have a situation." Marcus calmly sat down in his seat, pulled out his tablet, and opened his presentation. He was reviewing his slides about solar-powered water purification when Kelly leaned over him, invading his space. "Did you steal that tablet too?" Marcus looked up at her with those steady 8-year-old eyes. "No ma'am, my mother bought it for me. Would you like the receipt?" Tom Bradley arrived within minutes. He was a heavy-set white man in his 40s who'd worked with Kelly for years. They were friends, drinking buddies, and they shared the same ugly views about who belonged where. Tom saw Marcus sitting there, saw Kelly's outraged expression, and immediately assumed the worst. "Son, you need to come with me right now." Tom's voice was commanding, aggressive, like he was addressing a criminal instead of a child. Marcus looked up at him. "Why, sir? I'm in my assigned seat. I've done nothing wrong." Tom's face reddened. "Don't make this difficult. You're clearly in the wrong section." Weber jumped back in. "Finally, can we get this kid out of here? My conference call starts in 20 minutes and I need quiet." Donovan added her voice. "I don't feel safe with an unaccompanied child up here. What if something happens? Who's responsible?" But not everyone was on board with the cruelty. Michael Park, an Asian American man in his 30s sitting in 4D, spoke up. "He's just a kid with a ticket. Leave him alone." Stephen Miller, a white man in 5A, turned around and glared at Park. "Mind your business. We don't want trouble up here." That's when Marcus did something extraordinary. He stood up on his seat so he could look Tom Bradley in the eye at adult level. His voice projected through the entire first-class cabin with a clarity that silenced everyone. "My name is Marcus Jennings. I am 8 years old. I am flying to Seattle to represent my school in a national science competition. My mother purchased this ticket legally. I have my confirmation number, my ID, and my school permission forms. I know my rights as a passenger. If you remove me without cause, that's discrimination, and my mother will sue this airline." The cabin went dead silent. An 8-year-old just gave them a legal lesson. Kelly's face turned bright red. "Did this child just threaten us?" Tom pulled out his radio. "That's it. I'm calling the captain and airport police. This kid is out of control." Marcus sat back down, opened his book, and started reading like nothing happened. His hands were shaking slightly, but his face was calm. He wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing him scared. Margaret Henderson, an elderly white woman in 6A, whispered loudly to her neighbor. "That boy is too articulate. Someone taught him to scam the system. Children don't talk like that naturally." Carlos Rodriguez, a Latino man in 2B right next to Marcus, had heard enough. "He's clearly intelligent. Why can't you people see that? He's 8 years old and he's smarter than half the adults on this plane." Miller from 5A scoffed. "Oh, here we go with the race card. Always the victim." The cabin erupted, passengers arguing with each other, some defending Marcus, most attacking him. And through it all, Kelly screamed over everyone. "Everyone quiet! This child is causing a disturbance." Marcus hadn't raised his voice once. He was sitting quietly, reading his book, while adults melted down around him. Airport police boarded the aircraft. Officer Davis, a black man in his 40s with kind eyes and 20 years of experience, and Officer Thompson, a white woman in her 30s who looked tired of being called for nonsense. They walked into the chaos of first class. Kelly launched into her dramatic story immediately. "Officers, this child forced his way into first class, threatened staff members, and has been aggressive and disruptive to passengers. We need him removed for everyone's safety. Weber backed her up. He's been difficult since he boarded. Very hostile attitude. I'm a witness. Donovan piled on. I heard him threaten to sue. He's clearly been coached by someone. This is obviously fraud. Officer Davis looked at Marcus, then at the ring of angry white adults surrounding him, then back at Marcus. He'd seen this before. Too many times. Davis walked over and knelt down to Marcus's level. Son, can you show me your boarding pass and ID? Marcus handed over everything. His boarding pass, his school ID, his competition invitation letter, his unaccompanied minor documentation, his mother's authorization letter. Everything was organized in a folder like he'd prepared for this exact moment. Davis examined every document carefully. Thompson questioned Kelly. What specific threatening language did he use? Kelly fumbled. He said his mother would sue us. Thompson raised an eyebrow. After you tried to remove him from his legally purchased seat? Davis stood up. Everything here is legitimate. This child's ticket is valid, purchased 2 weeks ago through proper channels. All his documentation is in order. Tom Bradley protested. But he's 8. Children don't fly first class alone. That's suspicious. Davis's voice was firm. Actually, unaccompanied minors can fly first class with proper documentation, which he has. There's no violation here. Marcus spoke directly to the officers, his voice finally cracking slightly with emotion. Officers, I've been polite. I haven't raised my voice. I showed my documents multiple times. They keep accusing me of stealing and lying. Why are they treating me this way? Rodriguez stood up, holding his phone. I've been recording this entire thing. This child has done nothing wrong. This is harassment. Park joined in. This is racial profiling, plain and simple, and we're all witnessing it. Miller shot back. Oh, please, everything's about race with you people. Henderson added, in my day, children knew their place. Officer Davis turned to Kelly and Tom. This passenger has violated no laws or regulations. He stays in his seat. This matter is closed. Kelly's face contorted with rage. I have the right to refuse service if I feel unsafe. Davis looked at her incredulously. You feel unsafe from an 8-year-old with a physics book? Tom pulled out his trump card. We're calling the captain. This is our aircraft and we have final authority. Captain Richard Sullivan emerged from the cockpit. He was a white man in his 50s with 30 years of flying experience. Tom immediately launched into his lies. Captain, this child has been aggressive with staff and passengers, refusing to cooperate. We need him removed. Sullivan looked at tiny 8-year-old Marcus surrounded by a ring of angry white adults. He looked at the officers. He looked at the passengers recording on their phones. Son, have you been causing problems? Marcus looked him straight in the eye. No, sir. I've been sitting in my seat, reading my book, waiting to go to Seattle. These people don't think I belong in first class because of how I look. Sullivan shifted uncomfortably. That's a serious accusation, son. Marcus's voice was steady. It's the truth, sir, and my mother is going to be very upset when she hears about this. Weber actually laughed out loud. Oh, Mommy's going to be upset. I'm so scared. Other passengers joined in the mocking laughter. Sullivan turned to Kelly. If he's been quiet and non-threatening, we need to proceed with boarding. But Kelly wasn't done. Captain, I officially feel unsafe with this passenger. Per regulation. The jetway door suddenly banged open with such force that everyone jumped. Every single head turned toward the sound. And Victoria Jennings Rothschild walked onto that aircraft like a force of nature. If you think what happens next is satisfying, you need to subscribe right now because this mother is about to deliver the most legendary takedown in airline history. Kelly was still talking, still making her case about feeling unsafe from an 8-year-old. Tom was standing there with his chest puffed out, thinking he'd won. Captain Sullivan was trying to figure out how to handle this diplomatically. The racist passengers were smirking, thinking justice was on their side. None of them looked at the door. None of them saw who just walked in. None of them knew that their entire world was about to end. Because Victoria Jennings Rothschild heard everything. She saw everything. and she was about to make sure everyone involved paid the price. The jetway door banged open, and Victoria Jennings Rothschild stepped onto that aircraft like Judgment Day had arrived. She was 38 years old, tall, stunningly beautiful, wearing a $5,000 Armani power suit that probably cost more than Kelly's entire wardrobe. Her presence filled the cabin with an authority that made everyone instinctively straighten up. Behind her walked 3 corporate lawyers in sharp suits carrying briefcases, the airport director practically running to keep up, and 2 airline executives who looked like they were about to have heart attacks. The clicking of her Louboutin heels echoed through the plane like a countdown to judgment. Click, click, click. Each step was deliberate, powerful, terrifying. She walked straight past Kelly, past Tom, past the captain, past every single person who'd tormented her son. She went directly to Marcus. "Marcus, baby, are you all right?" Her voice was soft when she spoke to him, full of love and concern that cracked through her otherwise iron composure. Marcus finally let his guard down. The 8-year-old who'd been so strong, so brave, so composed through an hour of humiliation, jumped into his mother's arms and buried his face in her shoulder. "Mommy, they wouldn't believe me. I told them who you were and they laughed at me." Victoria held her son tight, stroking his hair, letting him feel safe for the first time since he'd arrived at that airport. Then she slowly turned to face the cabin, and her expression could have frozen hell itself. Her eyes swept across every face in first class. The passengers who'd mocked Marcus, the employees who'd terrorized him, the captain who'd failed to protect him, every single person who'd played a part in this nightmare. When she spoke, her voice was ice cold and sharp enough to cut steel. "My name is Dr. Victoria Jennings Rothschild. I am the founder, owner, and CEO of Skybridge Airlines. This airline, Continental Wing, is one of my wholly owned subsidiaries, and that brilliant child you've been terrorizing for the last hour is my son." Complete silence. You could have heard a pin drop. Every racist passenger's face drained of color, like someone had opened a valve. Kelly's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Tom Bradley backed against the wall like he could disappear into it. Captain Sullivan's eyes went wide with absolute horror. Victoria let the silence hang there for a moment, letting the weight of her words crush everyone who doubted Marcus. "Someone explain to me, and choose your words very carefully, why my 8-year-old son, with valid documents, was accused of theft, detained at the gate for 30 minutes, surrounded by police, and threatened with removal from a seat I personally purchased." Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Nobody even breathed. Victoria's voice dropped even lower, more dangerous. "No volunteers? Then I'll tell you why. Because you saw a black child and assumed he didn't belong. Because you couldn't conceive that a black woman could be successful enough to afford first class for her son. Because your racism is so deep, you'd rather humiliate a child than question your own prejudice." That's when James Patterson from the gate made the mistake of entering the aircraft. He'd been summoned by airport security, and he walked right into the execution chamber. Victoria turned to face him with the precision of a sniper locking onto a target. "Patterson, James. Employee ID 4782. Victoria's voice was clinical, emotionless, which somehow made it more terrifying. "You detained my son at the gate for 30 minutes on suspicion of ticket theft. You never verified his identity through proper channels. You never called the unaccompanied minor coordinator. You just assumed a black child with a first-class ticket must be a criminal. You're fired. Security will escort you from the airport immediately." Patterson's face went white. "Miss Rothschild, please, I have a family." Victoria cut him off. "My son is family. Did you think about family when you humiliated him? Escort him out." 2 security guards grabbed Patterson by the arms and removed him from the aircraft as he protested and begged. His pleas echoed down the jetway until they faded to nothing. Victoria turned to Linda Cooper, the gate agent who was shaking so hard she looked like she might collapse. "Linda Cooper, employee ID 3291. You laughed when my son said I was a CEO. You participated in his detention. You told other passengers he was a security risk. Collect your things. Cooper opened her mouth to speak, but Victoria raised one hand and Cooper went silent like someone had cut her vocal cords. Cooper was escorted away crying, her career ending in the span of 30 seconds. Victoria stepped fully into the first-class cabin. She looked at each passenger who'd been racist to Marcus, making eye contact with each one, letting them squirm under her gaze. She stopped at seat 1A. Mr. Weber? Richard Weber, you're a Platinum Elite member. You've flown with us 47 times this year. You said, "Is this kid seriously in first class?" and complained multiple times about my son's presence. Your lifetime status with Skybridge Airlines and all subsidiaries is revoked, effective immediately. You'll be rebooked in economy on a different flight. Gather your things. Weber's shock turned to outrage. You can't do this. I'm a paying customer. I have rights. Victoria's smile was colder than winter. I can, and I just did. I don't want racists representing my brand as elite members. Leave, now. Security removed Weber as he protested loudly about lawyers and lawsuits and discrimination. His voice faded down the jetway just like Patterson's. Victoria moved to seat 3B. Ms. Donovan, Patricia Donovan, you said you didn't feel safe with my child. I pulled your passenger file during my walk here. You have 3 complaints in your history, all against minorities. A black family last year, a Muslim man 6 months ago, a Latino woman 3 months ago. This is your pattern. You're banned from all Skybridge Airlines and subsidiaries for life. Security will escort you off and refund your ticket. Donovan stood up, indignant. This is discrimination against me. I'll sue. I'll go to the media. Victoria didn't even blink. No, this is consequences. There's a difference. Remove her. Donovan shrieked as security escorted her off the plane, her designer handbag swinging as she struggled. Victoria stopped at seat 6A. Mrs. Henderson, Margaret Henderson, you said my son was too articulate and must be scamming the system. You're 73 years old. You've lived through the civil rights movement. You should know better, but clearly you don't. You're banned from this airline for life. Leave now. Henderson clutched her chest dramatically. I'm an old woman. You can't treat me this way. This is elder abuse. Victoria's expression didn't change. My son is an 8-year-old child. You treated him like a criminal. Age doesn't excuse racism. Leave. Henderson was removed, muttering under her breath about the world going crazy and nobody respecting their elders anymore. Victoria turned to seat 5A. Mr. Miller? Stephen Miller? You said, oh please, everything's about race with you people and always the victim. Here's some education for you. When you witness a child being racially profiled and your response is to mock those defending him, you're not neutral, you're complicit. You're banned for life. Get out. Miller stood up, face red with anger. This is absurd. I barely said anything. This is thought police. This is... Victoria interrupted. You said enough. Remove him. Miller was dragged off by security, still arguing about free speech and cancel culture as his voice disappeared down the jetway. Victoria addressed the remaining passengers, her voice carrying to every corner of first class. Anyone else want to explain why an 8-year-old with valid documents deserved this treatment? The cabin was dead silent. Several passengers were crying. Some stared at their feet. Nobody dared to speak. Then, Victoria turned to Tom Bradley. Tom had been trying to make himself invisible, pressed against the galley wall, but there was nowhere to hide from what was coming. Supervisor Tom Bradley. Victoria's voice was surgical. You escalated the situation at every turn. You called the captain with false information about my son being aggressive. You supported your employees' discrimination without investigating. I had my team pull your file during my walk here. You have 4 prior complaints for racial bias that were buried by your regional director. That director is fired too, by the way. You're fired. You'll never work in aviation again. I'll personally ensure every airline in this country knows exactly what you did. Bradley's desperation was palpable. Miss Rothschild, please, I have 18 years with this company. I have a mortgage, car payments. Victoria's voice was merciless. And you used all 18 years to make passengers of color feel unwelcome. Leave. Bradley was removed, his protests fading as security escorted him off the aircraft. Then Victoria turned to face Kelly Morrison. The entire cabin leaned forward. This was the main event. Everyone knew it. Victoria walked slowly toward Kelly, and Kelly backed up with each step until she hit the galley wall with nowhere left to go. Victoria stopped inches from her face. Her voice dropped low and deadly. "Kelly Morrison, you're special. You're not just fired. I'm pressing criminal charges, harassment of a minor, false imprisonment. Yes, legally, detaining someone without cause is imprisonment. Filing a false report with law enforcement. My legal team will sue you personally and ensure you never work with children or vulnerable populations again. You saw my baby and you decided to torture him. That ends today." Kelly was crying now, mascara running down her face. "I was just doing my job, I thought." Victoria cut her off. "Your job is customer service. You terrorized my child. That's not service, that's cruelty. And you enjoyed it. I saw the videos from other passengers. You smiled when he was scared. You're not just unemployed, Kelly. You're going to be held accountable in court. Remove her and take her directly to airport police for processing." Kelly was sobbing as security put her in handcuffs and removed her from the aircraft. Her cries echoed through the plane until the jetway door closed behind her. Victoria turned to Captain Sullivan. Sullivan was sweating visibly, his uniform collar damp. "Captain Sullivan, you're in a different category. You arrived late to the situation, however, you failed to de-escalate. You questioned my son's honesty instead of investigating your crew's conduct. You violated company protocol for handling discrimination complaints. You're suspended pending investigation. 30 days. You'll attend mandatory bias training. If you complete it successfully and show genuine change, you can return to duty. If not, you're done. Understood?" Sullivan was shaken to his core. "Yes, ma'am. I apologize. To you and to Marcus. Sincerely." Victoria's voice was firm. "Tell him, not me." Captain Sullivan walked over and knelt down to Marcus's level. His eyes were wet. "Marcus, I'm sorry. I should have protected you. I failed you. That won't happen again." Marcus, with incredible grace for an 8-year-old who'd just been through hell, looked at the captain and said, "Thank you, Captain. I accept your apology." Victoria nodded to Sullivan. "You're grounded for 30 days. Use the time wisely. If you want to see what happened to all these people after this, and how Marcus's life changed, hit that subscribe button, because this story gets even better." Here's my question for you. Victoria fired employees, banned passengers, and pressed criminal charges. Do you think she went too far, or was this exactly what they deserved? Drop your honest opinion in the comments because people are debating this everywhere. The first-class cabin sat in stunned silence. Half the seats were now empty. Kelly was in handcuffs. Tom and Patterson were unemployed. 4 passengers were banned for life. Captain Sullivan was suspended. And Victoria Jennings Rothschild stood in the middle of it all, holding her 8-year-old son's hand, having delivered the most devastating display of justice anyone on that plane had ever witnessed. The revolution was complete. And nobody would ever forget what happened when they came for Victoria's child. But Victoria wasn't done, because while punishing the guilty was necessary, honoring the heroes was just as important. She turned away from the empty seats where the racists had been sitting and walked over to Carlos Rodriguez in seat 2B. "Mr. Rodriguez?" Victoria's voice was warm now, completely different from the ice she'd used on everyone else. "You defended my son when everyone else stayed silent or joined the attack. You recorded evidence that will be used in legal proceedings against Kelly Morrison. Thank you. Your next 10 flights with any Skybridge airline are complimentary, first class. And if you ever need anything at all, you have my personal number." She pulled a business card from her jacket pocket and handed it to him. Not a corporate card, her personal card with her direct cell phone number. Rodriguez looked at the card, then at Victoria, his eyes wet with emotion. "I just did what was right. Your son is amazing. Any parent would be proud to have a kid like him." Victoria squeezed his shoulder. "Not everyone did what was right. You did. That matters." She moved to Michael Park in seat 4D. Mr. Park, you also stood up for Marcus. You didn't film, but you spoke out repeatedly despite being told to mind your business. Same offer, 10 complimentary first-class flights, and my sincere gratitude. Park stood up and shook her hand. I have kids too, a son and a daughter. I couldn't stay silent. I kept thinking, what if that was my kid? I'd want someone to speak up for them. Victoria's voice cracked slightly. The world needs more people like you. Then she turned to Officers Davis and Thompson, who were still standing near the front of the cabin, having witnessed the entire takedown. Officer Davis, Officer Thompson, you handled this professionally. You saw through the lies immediately. Officer Davis, you looked at my son and saw a child with rights, not a problem to remove. That's good policing. I'm writing commendations to your chief and the airport director. Thank you for protecting my baby. Officer Davis smiled, and for the first time since boarding, he looked relaxed. Ma'am, your son handled himself with more dignity than most adults I deal with. You've raised an incredible kid. Victoria smiled for the first time since stepping on that plane. Tears filled her eyes. Yes, I have. Then Victoria turned to address the remaining first-class passengers. The ones who weren't racist enough to be banned, but weren't brave enough to speak up either. Her voice was firm but not cruel. The rest of you stayed silent. You watched an 8-year-old be humiliated, and you did nothing. You're not banned, you're not fired, but you're complicit. And you'll have to live with that. I hope you think about Marcus the next time you witness injustice and have a choice to speak or stay silent. Several passengers looked down, ashamed. Some were crying quietly. One woman in her 40s actually stood up, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry. I was scared to speak up. I didn't want to cause trouble. I'm a coward. Victoria looked at her with something that might have been compassion. Then be braver next time. That's how we change the world, one brave moment at a time. The woman sat back down, still crying but nodding. Victoria finally sat down next to Marcus in seat 2A. She held his hand and they talked quietly, their voices low enough that only those closest could hear. Baby, I am so proud of you. You were so brave. Did they scare you? Marcus leaned into his mother's shoulder. A little, Mommy. But I remembered what you taught me. I have as much right to be here as anyone. I didn't do anything wrong. Victoria wrapped her arm around him. That's right, baby. You never have to make yourself smaller for people who can't handle your greatness. You are brilliant. You are worthy. You belong everywhere you have earned the right to be. And you've earned everything. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then asked the question that broke Victoria's heart. Mommy, why do people hate us? Victoria's tears fell freely now. She didn't try to hide them. Because, baby, some people are taught to fear what they don't understand, and they never learn to question what they were taught. But that's their problem to fix, not yours. You just keep being magnificent. Marcus nodded against her shoulder, processing this truth that no 8-year-old should have to understand. The plane finally took off, 2 hours delayed. But the mood in first class was completely different now. The racist passengers were gone. The abusive employees were fired. What remained was a cabin full of people who'd just witnessed something extraordinary. Some were ashamed, some were inspired. All of them were changed. During the flight, several passengers approached Marcus. Rodriguez came over with his phone, showing Marcus photos of his own kids. This is my son, Diego. He's 10. He wants to be a scientist too. I'm going to tell him about you. You're his hero now. Marcus smiled shyly. I'm not a hero. I just like science. Rodriguez laughed. That's exactly what a hero would say. Michael Park walked over holding a book. Marcus, I bought this at the airport bookstore before boarding. It's about advanced robotics. I was going to read it on the flight, but I think you'll get more out of it than me. For the plane ride, keep changing the world, buddy. Marcus took the book with reverence, like it was treasure. Thank you, Mr. Park. I'll read it and tell you what I think. The woman who'd apologized earlier approached with a bag of cookies from her carry-on. Marcus, honey, I'm so sorry I didn't speak up. You deserved better. I'll do better next time, I promise. She handed him the cookies. My grandmother's recipe. I made them for my trip. Marcus accepted them with grace and kindness that belied his 8 years. Thank you, ma'am. I forgive you. And these look delicious. Each gesture was small, but together they showed Marcus something important. That for every person who hates without reason, there are people who care. For every Kelly Morrison, there's a Carlos Rodriguez. For every Tom Bradley, there's an Officer Davis. And sometimes regular people find their courage and become the heroes they were always meant to be. If you're loving this story of justice and redemption, smash that subscribe button, because the ending is going to leave you in tears. Here's my question for you. Victoria said the silent passengers were complicit even though they didn't actively participate in the racism. Do you agree? Is staying silent when you witness injustice the same as participating in it? This is a real debate, so drop your thoughts in the comments. Victoria sat next to her son for the entire flight, holding his hand, occasionally stroking his hair, making sure he felt safe and loved and protected. Marcus eventually fell asleep on her shoulder, exhausted from the trauma of the day. Victoria looked down at him sleeping peacefully and made a silent promise. This would never happen to him again. She'd make sure of it. Not just for Marcus, but for every child who looked like him, and had to be twice as good, twice as brave, twice as dignified, just to be treated like they belonged. The revolution had started. And Victoria Jennings Rothschild was just getting warmed up. The plane landed in Seattle, and Victoria walked Marcus to the competition venue. It was massive. 200 students from across the country, all competing to present their innovations. Marcus was the youngest competitor by 2 years. But he wasn't intimidated. He'd already survived something far scarier than a science competition. When Marcus's turn came, he walked onto that stage and presented his solar-powered water purification system with confidence and passion that left the judges speechless. These were Stanford and MIT professors, people who'd seen thousands of projects, and they were blown away. One judge leaned forward. "How old did you say you are?" Marcus stood tall at the microphone. 8, sir. I'll be 9 next month." The judge shook his head in disbelief. "This is graduate-level engineering. How did you design this?" Marcus smiled. "I read a lot, and my mommy always says if something doesn't exist, I should invent it. Clean water doesn't exist everywhere, so I invented a way to make it." The judges deliberated for less than 10 minutes. Marcus won first place and a $100,000 research grant. The crowd erupted. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Victoria sat in the front row sobbing with pride, watching her baby shine the way he was always meant to. Marcus held his trophy above his head and shouted into the microphone, "This is for every kid who was told they don't belong. We belong everywhere." The crowd roared even louder. Every child in that room who'd ever been doubted, ever been dismissed, ever been told they weren't good enough, they all heard him. And they believed. 2 weeks later, Victoria held a press conference at Skybridge Airlines headquarters. The room was packed with journalists from every major outlet. Cameras flashed, microphones crowded the podium. 2 weeks ago, my 8-year-old son was racially profiled, detained, and terrorized by employees of my own airline. This is unacceptable. As a result, I'm implementing sweeping changes across all Skybridge Airlines and subsidiaries. She announced mandatory quarterly bias training for every single employee. Zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. First offense is termination. Independent Oversight Committee with community representation. Passenger Bill of Rights prominently displayed at every gate. $10 million donated to organizations fighting discrimination in travel. And the Marcus Jennings Scholarship Fund. Full rides for 100 minority students in STEM fields annually. Victoria's voice was powerful. My son's experience was not unique. It happens every day to Black and brown travelers. That ends now. Not just at my airlines, but across the industry. We're setting a new standard, and I challenge every airline in America to meet it or be left behind. A reporter raised his hand. "Miss Rothschild, do you think firing all those people was too harsh?" Victoria didn't hesitate. "Do you think terrorizing my 8-year-old was too harsh?" "No, then we're done here. Another reporter tried. What do you say to people who call this cancel culture? Victoria's response was ice cold. I call it consequences. For too long, people faced no consequences for racism. That era is over. 6 months later, everything had changed. Marcus was on the cover of Time magazine for kids with the headline, "The 8-year-old Changing the World." His water purification system was being implemented in 15 countries. UNICEF partnered with him to deploy units in refugee camps. He was invited to speak at the United Nations. Kelly Morrison's court case ended with a guilty verdict: community service and mandatory diversity education. Tom Bradley and James Patterson were unemployable in aviation, both working minimum wage jobs. The racist passengers who were banned tried to sue Victoria and lost every single case. But one of them, Stephen Miller, did something unexpected. He wrote a public apology that went viral. I was wrong. I was raised with biases I never questioned. Watching that 8-year-old boy handle my cruelty with grace taught me more than a lifetime of ignorance. I'm doing the work to change. It's never too late. Captain Sullivan completed his bias training, apologized publicly, and became an advocate for reform. Carlos Rodriguez and Michael Park became friends with Marcus and Victoria. They attended Marcus's 9th birthday party with their families. Continental Wing Airlines discrimination complaints dropped to near zero. Employee satisfaction increased by 40% because the bigots were gone, and the airline's revenue increased by 30% as diverse travelers finally felt safe flying with them. Marcus gave a TED Talk at age 9 titled, "Why 8-Year-Olds Deserve Respect Too." It got 50 million views. In it, he said something that shook adults everywhere. Adults think kids don't understand racism. We do. We feel it every day. When you cross the street because a black kid is walking toward you. When you follow us in stores. When you assume we stole something we bought. We see you, and we remember. So when you tell us, be the change you want to see, remember this, we're watching you too. Be the adults we deserve. 2 years after that flight, Marcus was 10 years old. He boarded another Continental Wing flight with Victoria. The entire first-class cabin recognized him and erupted in applause. The flight attendant, a young black man named Isaiah, greeted them with tears in his eyes. Mr. Jennings, Miss Rothschild, it's an honor. Marcus, your story is why I applied to work here. This airline changed because of you. Thank you. Marcus, humble as always, smiled. Thank you for making everyone feel welcome. That's what matters. They sat in seats 2A and 2B, the same seats from that day. Victoria held Marcus's hand. Do you remember how scared you were? Marcus looked at his mother. I remember how brave I decided to be, Mommy. You taught me that. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. No, baby. You taught yourself. I just gave you permission to shine. The plane took off smoothly. Marcus looked out the window at the clouds stretching endlessly below them. Mommy, when I grow up, I'm going to make sure no kid ever feels the way I felt that day. Victoria kissed his forehead. Baby, you're already doing that. You're only 10 and you've changed the world. Imagine what you'll do next. Marcus smiled and pulled out a blueprint from his backpack. He was designing a solar-powered airplane. Because that's what Marcus did. He saw problems and he solved them. He saw injustice and he changed it. He saw a world that tried to make him small, and he made himself impossible to ignore. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button, because stories like this need to be told, shared, and remembered. Kelly Morrison thought she had power because she had a uniform. Tom Bradley thought he had power because he had seniority. Those racist passengers thought they had power because they had money. But real power? Real power belonged to an 8-year-old boy who refused to believe he didn't belong. Real power belonged to a mother who used her position to create justice instead of just profit. Real power belonged to the Carlos Rodriguezes and Michael Parks, who spoke up when staying silent would have been easier. Marcus Jennings didn't just win a science competition. He didn't just change an airline. He changed the conversation about who deserves respect, who deserves dignity, and who gets to decide who belongs where. And he did it all at 8 years old, with grace, courage, and a belief in himself that no amount of racism could break. That's the real story. That's the revolution. And it started with one child who refused to move from his seat. If you enjoyed this story, like, subscribe, and share with others so they can learn too. See you in our next video.